Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from Labiotech. I'm Dylan Kissane, and this is episode 148 for the podcast. AI is a part of so many conversations these days, both inside and outside of the biotech industry. It's already changing how people research, communicate, and interact, and even if it's already having a significant impact on biotech, it seems almost certain that the biggest impacts are still to come. Cradle is a Dutch-Swiss biotech startup founded in 2021 and headquartered in the Netherlands. It has developed a web-based software platform that leverages generative AI, or GenAI, to accelerate protein design and optimization, aiding scientists in biotechnology R&D. Cradle's technology integrates AI with wet lab experimentation, doubling the speed of most projects compared to industry benchmarks. I sat down with Cradle co-founder Elise de Reus this week to discover how their software platform is putting the tech into biotech and learn how some of the biggest names in pharma R&D are coming to rely on Cradle to accelerate their experimentation and get therapies to patients faster. I hope you enjoy our chat. Elise, welcome to Beyond Biotech.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks for having me.
I want to get started by learning a little bit about you. Can you share a little bit about this journey of yours? You seem to have a real interest in life sciences right from the start. You did your master's, you did your PhD. What sparked this passion?
I mean, thinking back to my first encounter with DNA, it was actually in a fifth grade presentation on explorers of the early world. And I pasted a Giphy of a rotating molecule of DNA. It had nothing to do with the story, but I thought it looked pretty. I didn't know what it was. And it was only later that I figured, oh, wow, this molecule, besides being really beautiful, is also really awesome in how it shapes life. And I think the spark for me really came later when studying at TU Delft, biotechnology, which has a very strong history of engineering yeast and applications of microorganisms like yeast in industry. And that for me was this connecting the fascination for DNA as a molecule to, wow, we can actually use it to engineer biology and then drive results in a larger scale. So in industry for chemicals or for pharmaceuticals.
And your doctoral work at DTU, what did you write about?
That was on fungi. So filamentous fungi, they're pretty cool. They can influence their environment by making all sorts of beautiful molecules, which can turn into small molecule drugs. They're also extremely efficient at making proteins at very high concentrations, and you can use that in all sorts of applications, like making dairy protein.
And you finished your PhD, you moved on to some roles in industry there in Zymurgen, Perfect Day, Friesen Campina. How did these sort of experiences shape your perspective on what industry can do with biotechnology?
Yeah, so Perfect Day was a really good place to see how a single ingredient made in biotech can help to unblock or shape an industry. So at Perfect Day, what we were working on was making whey protein, but rather than from a cow, making that from fermentation. And if you think about milk, of course, it has all these different components, and you can't tune a cow to produce more or less of a specific component like whey protein. But you can turn on a fermenter or fermentation process and make that ingredient very precisely, so precision fermentation at lower impact. And thereby help to bring the system into balance. At Zymurgen, the cool thing there was learning the importance of high throughput, reliable data. And so it was a synthetic biology company in California with a ton of robotics and lab automation, and really the ability for any scientist to run hundreds of experiments per week.
And so these different experiences you had, was there one particular moment that led you to the decision to say, look, I'm going to co-found something, I'm going to build something of my own?
I wish there was. I mean, I think it was more if I answer this honestly, more a gradual process of understanding the power of the approaches that are used in labs today. So really the power of running more experiments to just have more shots on goal, but also the limitation of running experiments and seeing pretty low success rates. And so the realization that scaling out experimentation is only part of the story, but the other part of the story needs to be putting in better designs and better hypotheses into those experiments to make the most of this time and energy and all the resources that you're spending in the wet lab. And so that is what sparked the conversations with the folks who became co-founders at Cradle to explore how we can best bring machine learning and generative AI into that workflow of a wet lab scientist like I was up till then.
Well, I guess moving from being a scientist to a co-founder, though, means you have to take on a lot of different responsibilities and a lot more responsibility. Setting up that wet lab, working on partnerships. When it comes to the business side, the entrepreneurial side, how's that been for you? Have you enjoyed that part of the journey as well?
Oh, it's wonderful. It was never an explicit goal of mine to become an entrepreneur, but there's just so much that goes into to building a company, like building the technology, figuring out really which customers you're going to serve, building out this team. I think what has been the most rewarding in building Cradle is this technical courage that is very deeply embedded in the company. So by that, I mean choosing the problem that you want to solve and then learning the skills that are needed to solve it, rather than starting from your own skills and going, where can I apply them? And that goes for everyone working at Cradle at an individual level. So there's a lot of interdisciplinary learning because we're working at this intersection of machine learning, generative AI, and biotechnology. But it also means as a company that you have technical courage by building the team that is best enabled to solve this big problem or really help to drive the impact in the world that you want to see.
Let's talk about Cradle for a second and really introduce it. For anyone who doesn't know Cradle, can you describe its core mission and how you really aim to impact biotechnology? And I guess in particular in areas like sustainability and when it comes to health.
Yeah. So our mission at Cradle is to help scientists develop better proteins in less time and fewer experiments. What we're doing is building a software platform that scientists can use to bring generative AI into their wet lab protein engineering workflow. And so the challenge that we're addressing is that engineering proteins means that you're shaping a protein and trying to adjust it so that it meets all these different requirements in order to be able to bring it to market. So if you're thinking about an enzyme, that means it has to be active, and very fast. It has to be very specific, but it also has to be able to withstand all the challenges of being in an industrial process. Or for a drug, it has to be efficacious, right? An antibody has to bind to the right cancer cell. It should not attack your healthy tissues, but again, it should be developable so that it can be formulated into a drug that then reaches patients worldwide. Given all of these constraints and all of these requirements that a single protein must fulfill, it's really challenging for a scientist to tweak it in such a way that it meets all of these objectives. And that's where generative AI can really help to accelerate the process, to introduce very specific changes to proteins to make sure that these can get to market in fewer total experiments in less time.
Is this the same sort of generative AI that people are talking about when they're using ChatGPT and Grok and these sort of models there? Or you're talking about something very specific to biotech?
ChatGPT made it a lot easier for me to explain what Cradle does, because you can make the analogy ChatGPT for proteins, where ChatGPT is a large language model. So it learns the language of humans by devouring internet and a lot of written language. Our protein language models see all the protein sequences that we as scientists know in the world. And so they learn the language of proteins. And then you can get more specific, and the prompts that you ask ChatGPT are a question, and then it gives you an answer, and then you can Google it to fact check whether that is correct. the prompt that you would give a protein language model is, given this antibody sequence, how can I tweak it so that it is more thermally stable and it binds more strongly? And so the output of this generative model is a protein sequence that has certain amino acid mutations that increase the likelihood of this protein meeting all your requirements.
This is already proving somewhat attractive to partners as well. You're bringing in companies like J&J Innovation, Nosozymes, Twist Bioscience. What do these sort of collaborations mean for the work you're doing?
Yeah, we're super proud of the partners that we get to support. Also in that list are the likes of Novo Nordisk or Corteva Catalyst. Scientists are really the ones driving the real world results. They are running the experiments in their labs. They're working on programs across medicines and sustainable chemicals and all sorts of other applications. And they do this with the help of Cradle. And so our vision long term is to support every scientist working on protein engineering in the wet lab. And this is just the start of working with these awesome teams to help them accelerate research.
Is it hard to get people on board with this vision, or are people really starting to come around now?
There is a lot more awareness of the technology, which is great. And people are starting to see how impactful it can be. It also comes with a challenge of figuring out what's real and what's hype. So quite some demystification that needs to happen. Some people are very skeptical. Other people believe that AI will turn anything into gold. And the reality is somewhere in between. I think what is at the heart of this is that ChatGPT, when it gives you an answer, it's very easy to fact check it through a simple Google search. Whereas if a generative protein model provides you with a set of sequences and it says, try these sequences in the wet lab, then as a scientist, you know that testing those sequences will take you 8 to 12 or even more weeks and thousands of dollars. And so it is a slower iterative cycle that is more costly. And before you really commit to using a novel approach like generative AI, you want to make sure that you trust this model and that it will make good use of all the work that you're putting in the wet lab. And that's really what Cradle helps to do, is to make sure that the models are developed in such a way that they are robust and that they are validated. And it's a shame that you can't see where I'm sitting, because behind me, through a glass wall, you can actually see the Cradle wet lab that we have in-house, which we use to A/B test any model. So any development that we have on the computational side in our algorithms, we test in-house on all sorts of different protein projects to make sure that it actually works and that it improves the quality of these models before we ship them to customers.
The people working in the wet labs for your partners there, they won't necessarily have any coding experience or prompting experience. How are you actually making this generative AI accessible to them?
Right. So one clarification is that Cradle is not a CRO, so we don't offer wet lab services to our customers, but actually we fit as a software platform into their wet lab workflow. And so our customers will typically run the experiments within their own wet lab or with a partner CRO that they have relationships with. It is very easy for them to use these generative AI techniques through Cradle without coding experience, because it is a software platform with a very intuitive user interface. And so it's quite easy actually to start a project on Cradle, run models to generate new protein sequences, and then test those sequences in the lab over different rounds.
So how does Cradle maybe position itself then on the market? Are you a software company with just a specialization in biotech? Are you a biotech company with a software platform? How do you describe yourself?
I would say we are a tech bio company. So we are technology first. We build really powerful machine learning tools those are at the heart of the Cradle product. But we also make sure that there is a really strong interface with our final users. So our scientists using or customer scientists using the platform. So really building user interfaces that enable anyone working on protein engineering to access these tools in an easy way. And so to get started on a project, you can we run projects through the early phases. For example, if you're talking drug discovery, like the hit identification phase, where maybe you don't have so much data yet, or you're working with data from like an immunization campaign, all the way through to maybe you're in a late stage project and you're in lead optimization. You can get started with on Cradle by uploading your data or indicating what sequence you would like to start from. So which protein you would like to take as a starting point. Then you define the goals for your project. So which objectives, what criteria are you looking for this protein to meet, and the assays that you plan to run. And then you can very easily configure the models by saying, please don't make any changes in this part of the protein. Please focus here and introduce a maximum of 10 mutations. This is where, as a scientist, you can really configure these models to work with them and inject your own understanding of the project that you're working on. And then you just hit run, and the models run. They'll generate a small library for you. And the next day when you come into work, you will have a small library of sequences that have been selected by these models from hundreds of thousands of sequences that they evaluated in silico as the small capsule that is most likely to help you get to your goals faster. And so most likely means these sequences will have very good diversity so that you've got more horses in the race, and you're less likely to get stuck in your program. It also means that you can have more diversity to strengthen like a patent situation, right? And also just sequences that are predicted to score best across all these different properties that you want to optimize your protein for.
Cradle it was first described to me as Photoshop for proteins. This is how it was described to me. Is that fair? And can you explain maybe what that means in context?
Yeah, so Photoshop is a tool that you use to edit photos so that they are good enough to use in your photo album or for your marketing campaign. You can also think of image generators like DALL-E that can generate a photo from scratch. Cradle, I would say, is a combination of the two. So scientists use Cradle to generate new protein sequences with edited properties. So tweaking very specific properties like binding affinity, like enzymatic activity, like expression.
You mentioned before you worked early in your career on whey proteins and synthetic whey proteins. You've also worked now on proteins for animal-free food with Cradle. Can you walk me through a specific use case like animal-free food? How would it work in the lab from start to finish? Do we start with that goal of where we want to be and then start to use Cradle to find us the right way there?
So very often there are really great starting points that evolution has already come up with. So natural proteins that you would like to then tweak across certain properties so that you can use them in your final application. For proteins, it can mean you would like them to change a little bit so that they can be expressed, which is a fancy way of saying it's easy for a cell to make a lot of them, which is useful for the unit economics of your process. For enzymes, which are also very commonly found in alternative protein type foods or other parts of the food industry, it can mean that you want to increase the speed with which they catalyze a reaction or the specificity, so to make sure that there aren't any off products that are formed. Other really great examples in food and ingredients are fragrances and flavors that we have historically harvested from plants that maybe live in endangered areas, vulnerable ecosystems, and where biotechnology can offer a way to produce these same fragrances or flavors at a lower environmental impact.
What about applications when it comes to medicine? Are you seeing any early work there?
Absolutely. This is going to, and by this, generative AI, generative protein design is already changing the way in which drug discovery is done. And I think we are going to see a lot of really exciting results and new drugs coming to market that were developed with these technologies. Right now, to put it into context, the mean time to get a biologic into clinical trials is anywhere from 3 to 6 years from that initial discovery to phase 1 clinical trials. And then there's another 6 to 7 years in clinical. And this whole process costs, I mean, the estimates vary, but 2.3 billion in R&D was an estimate that was put out by Deloitte. This is true across all different types of biologics. So whether you're talking antibodies or vaccines or other type of recombinant proteins like cytokines or antibody drug conjugates, even CAR T. And generative AI can really help to increase the efficacy. So often this is binding strength, functional readouts, as well as the safety, so preventing immunogenicity, like unwanted immunogenicity effects, and manufacturability, so things like thermal stability and solubility and preventing aggregation. Cradle really helps across different modalities and across different properties. So the models are able to drive projects forward at greater speeds across different types of programs. So we're working on dozens of programs with our partners across, like 6+ different modalities and many different properties. One cool example recently was a protein engineering competition that Adaptive Bio hosted, where the challenge was to develop better binders, antibody binders to EGFR, which is the epidermal growth factor, which is a target for cancer therapies like cetuximab. And the challenge was to create binders that were at least 10 mutations away from this starting point, cetuximab, where over 130 teams participated and they submitted over 1,100 designs. And Cradle's designs came out as the winner. Only 2 of the 1,100 designs actually improved over cetuximab. One of those was Cradle's, and upon winning, we had the opportunity to experimentally validate an extra 10 designs, and we found out that actually all of the designs submitted by Cradle would have won that competition. So we would have dominated the leaderboard, which was really cool to see because the other teams used other popular open source tools and all sorts of different designs. And it was really a testament to the ability of the Cradle platform to optimize a very important property, so binding affinity of an existing molecule without having seen data specifically for that molecule. So we refer to this in technical terms as a zero-shot project or diversification around an existing starting point.
That's medicine. You're also working in sustainable materials. Is there a project that comes to mind that has stood out as a success so far in sustainable materials?
There are a ton of really interesting projects that we're working on, and unfortunately I can't divulge or reveal the details of all of them because they are also with our customers. One company that I find really inspiring in the sustainable materials space is Geno, formerly Genomatica. So they're making bio-based nylon. You can actually buy shirts that have this product in them. It's also used in things like clothing or carpets, or like auto parts, or just the stuff that we have around us. And their estimate is that this technology could save over 85 million tons of CO2, which is comparable to the annual emissions of a country like Greece or Austria. And compared to the petrochemical variant, the CO2 emissions would be reduced by over 90%. And I think those are really the types of impacts that biotechnology can have. And so I think it's going to be one of the most interesting fields to watch in terms of planetary and human health in the coming decades.
It's got me thinking this model of yours then is it's a proprietary approach as opposed to an open source approach. What's the business model there? Is it a license? Do you license it out to top pharma companies, or is it on a success basis? How can you describe that business model?
Yeah, so the business model really has three pillars. We are a software company, so software as a service, which means that customers who use Cradle pay for accessing the platform for protein design on an annual basis. We don't take any royalty payments or milestone payments because we're building a tool and we're putting it in the hands of these teams. And so they are paying for it as a tool. It also means that any IP that is generated, so new sequences that come out of Cradle's models, also belong to the customer. And any data that they upload into the platform stays there. So we never pool data across customers to train models for new customers. Which means that it's very safe and secure. And if obviously IP in this space is the gold, and any company that is working on protein engineering is very careful with their IP. This business model approach differentiates Cradle from other machine learning, generative AI, machine learning companies in the space. And it means that we are a platform that has quite a broad usage. It also means that we can see where this technology works really well, and we can drive results across a larger number of projects compared to going very deep, doing wet lab work specifically with our customers, and negotiating royalty and milestone deals. And I've never met someone working in pharma or non-pharma companies that enjoy negotiating royalty deals. It takes a huge amount of time, and it's also fundamentally not what is going to help this industry move forward at speed. So if you look at the software industry, where my co-founders Jelle and Steph and Eli came from, open source, or just the ability to build a tech stack is so integral to how innovations come to market. Whereas in biotechnology, there's a stronger culture of reinventing wheels, building things in-house. And it makes sense if you have to, give away a share of your royalties for every vendor that you work with. You're going to think very seriously about building things in-house. But we see that machine learning doesn't really scale that way. And the best machine learning will be built by a company like ours that can really run a lot of different projects and specifically iterate on the machine learning models using in-house wet lab development.
So what are the hurdles that you're facing then? The business model is locked down. What are the technical or maybe the scientific hurdles that your team is focused on and really want to keep overcoming in these months ahead?
So we see continuously how powerful these models are and how well they're able to solve problems across the biotech domain, so across modalities and across properties. Demonstrating this does take time. Wet lab work takes time. Any iteration takes 3 to 4 or even more months. And so building out the case studies to show new customers or potential customers of the Cradle platform that these models work and are likely to work for their program takes time. The other thing there is that it's really important to always ensure that we are delivering the best possible quality of our generative machine learning approaches that are at the heart of the Cradle platform. And that is why we have our wet lab to run experiments, watch the behavior of these models, and help them to make the most out of the wet lab data that they are receiving, and meaningfully accelerate these processes.
Are there any regulatory problems that you're going to face there? I mean, these are big pharma companies that are globally present. They'll have labs in Europe, they'll have labs in the United States, and those labs will have different regulatory regimes, especially when it comes to tech and to AI as well. How are you overcoming that, or is this a problem that you're facing, or is this a problem for the partner to have to solve on their IT side?
I think as with other technologies, it is really important to not regulate the tool itself, but regulate how it is used. And this is where a company like Cradle does rely on regulatory agencies like the FDA to confirm that the products that are being developed are safe and will not cause harm. That said, we do have certain areas within the Cradle terms of service where we also maintain the right to not work on projects if we believe that there is a real risk of causing harm through these projects. And this is an active discussion also in the field of generative AI for protein design on how we as a community can work together to maximize the positive impact and minimize the downside risk of dual use. And there are things, luckily, that we can learn from, for example, consortia around DNA synthesis providers who have also come together to formulate which types of DNA they will or will not ship to customers and how they screen for potential misuse of the technology.
I guess if we can look more broadly now, AI itself is just transforming biotech, it's transforming techbio as well. Where do you see it making the really big impact in, say, the next 12 to 18 months, and how does Cradle fit into that?
Do you mean where AI is transforming biotech, or what else is going on in biotech that is being transformed?
I guess where AI is having an impact, in particular this generative AI.
Gosh, where is it not? In companies and industries all across our society, people, I think, are now considering how to best bring generative AI into the organization. You see it in the creative industries. You see it in software, so in coding with assisted by generative AI. You see it in biotechnology, on protein design. What I find really interesting is the challenge that lies beyond just the technical tools and how to best use them and to figure out where they work well and where a human is very much needed in the loop. But also to look at a broader picture of how do organizations need to change if they are going to adopt this new wave of technologies. And so this is more a process of change management where also we as Cradle sit together with executives at the companies that we work with to talk through how will the structure of, for example, a biotech R&D organization change to make the most use of generative AI as a new technology.
So what's the most exciting thing that you're talking about when you sit down with your co-founders? You're talking about what the world is going to look like in 12 months or 2 years for your company and your team. What actually gets you really excited?
Most things. I would say all of it. There is so much potential for these technologies, and there is no limit to the creativity of scientists all around the world in using biotechnology to address some of these fundamental challenges that we're facing as the world. And I think it's a joy to be able to work on a company like Cradle, where we are putting tools in the hands of these scientists to help them do their best work.
Fantastic. Elise, it's been a joy having you join us today on Beyond Biotech. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dylan.
That's it for this episode. Don't forget to check out all the latest news and analysis at Labiotech.eu. I hope wherever you are in the world, you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Beyond Biotech.